Tell us your thoughts a little bit on the tax system and how we can encourage entrepreneurial thinking and at the same time trying to help lift the bottom 5 billion. Do you have any ideas turning around in your head?
When I say in my book that I don't think increase in taxes is the solution, it isn't because I'm supporting rich people making more money. I'm just not supporting the government taking more money and wasting it. And let me just give you a glaring example. So a glaring example is that I have never met anyone that doesn't support the fact that if someone volunteers for the armed forces, part of that deal, part of the deal we make with men and women that do that, is you get free health care in the Veterans Administration, right? The VA hospitals. Right. But what that's turned into is free bad health care, which wasn't the deal. So why do we need this whole separate system that costs billions of dollars to run, that's not effective and not efficient? Why aren't we giving them a card that lets them do just what I do, which is I walk into a hospital, if I chop my finger off, I go into the hospital and I show them my insurance card and the bill gets paid and I pay my deductible or whatever. But why can't we just give them a card? Why are we building this whole infrastructure? Well, we do that because that's jobs and that's patronage and it's an infrastructure that no one wants to deal with. How do you undo it? Because it's hard and it's messy. Well, that's what these politicians are supposed to be able to deal with, is real adult problems. So we have almost as many post offices as we had, when I was growing up. Like, when's the last time you mailed a letter? Like we don't move with the times at the government. We just keep on taking in more money and spending it. So I'm not saying we don't have problems. I'm saying we do have problems. I'm just saying giving the government more money to waste might not be the solution. And for instance, here's two examples. We had $1 trillion overseas, and I wrote a letter to President Trump suggesting this, but it didn't happen. We had the $1 trillion overseas, remember, because if it was over there, it wasn't being taxed, and you brought it here, it should be taxed. So I said to President Trump, I said, why don't you outline 3 or 4 really important infrastructure projects this country needs? Like one thing, light rail out to the suburbs, so that everybody's moving to an urban environment, and it's becoming unaffordable. So people are fighting traffic to get to where they can work. In rural America, is falling apart. It's not sustainable. What about fast infrastructure out there, as an example? What about high-speed internet out to these rural areas? What about creating job centers out in those rural areas? I said, come up with some internet infrastructure projects and tell these big corporations they can bring their $1 trillion back to America tax-free, as long as it's invested in American infrastructure. That didn't go anywhere. So there are lots of, what about giving entrepreneurs a tax break, significant tax break, if when they sell their company, they agree to take the winnings and do another startup. Not take the winnings and buy a third house, invest in another startup. There are a lot of countries that have an entrepreneur tax, which is 10%, as long as you invest it back in another business. So there are ways to encourage people to invest, and we should be using the tax code, weaponizing it to help people create jobs.